Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership in business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone. I am excited today with our guest, Sarah Naccarato. Her and her husband actually started a graphic sign business several years ago. And Sarah has an interesting story she's going to share with us because they didn't buy a franchise and they didn't start exactly from scratch. They were able to leverage a network of other similar businesses to get kickstarted in this new business in a way that leveraged Sarah's operational expertise in the corporate world and her husband's expertise as an artist. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're super glad to have you. I'd love to just start with, could you just tell us what is the business? And then we'll get into a little bit about how you got started.
Sure. So technically we are a custom sign manufacturing company, and the manufacturing part was really important because of how we funded our business to begin with. We were looking at lots of different types of opportunities. I had decided I really wanted to get out of the corporate world and be in charge of my own time and how I spent it and how I used it. And so we looked at all kinds of things from, small restaurant franchises to other types of, healthcare franchises. And I didn't want to be committed to, any top percentage of our gross having to go somewhere else, because that would just be working for someone else again. And I stumbled upon this sign manufacturing co-op, they called it, where they had an existing network of maybe 200 other sign companies across the nation that were being started and run by people similar to myself. That means people who had spent a good deal of time in the corporate world already and were now transitioning into running their own business. And so you had a network of people who understood, had a similar approach, I guess, to starting and growing a business, and understood everything from, cash flow to marketing to, customer retention, things of that nature, things that you might not, have as deep a knowledge in if you hadn't had that prior corporate experience and just started your business from scratch. So it gave us a common ground to work with other sign companies across the nation when we got started and to really leverage them for help. And likewise, we would provide help for them. And it also gave us an opportunity to join a much larger buying group for negotiating pricing with vendors, such as material suppliers. And the reason it was important that we be a manufacturing company is that we started our startup funds for the business came from my 401k, which had grown quite substantially in the corporate world. And I basically set up and I think we were advised on this both by the companies called Sign World, the co-op, and Guidant, that you could do a direct rollover into a new 401k that you set up for yourself for your new business and fund your business. And basically your new 401k is the primary shareholder in your new business. It just seemed brilliant to me without, taking any hit on early distribution.
Yeah, or potentially having to take on more debt.
Exactly.
I'm curious, Sarah, it sounds like you looked at a lot of other opportunities. So maybe you could help us understand, how did you go out and look for opportunities? Did you work with anyone? Were you just doing research online? So give us a view of the search process and then how you found these guys, Sign World.
Sure. So in my previous career, I had over 15 years experience in executive search and research. And my most recent experience had been building a research center in India. So I felt pretty good about doing my own kind of, corporate intelligence research on the internet myself at the time. And that's what I did. I just started getting in and reading and digging and looking at different opportunities myself online. And I stumbled across Sign World. And at the time, my husband is still an artist, a graphic artist. And I stumbled across Sign World, and I was looking at the package of things that you are included in the initiation price. And one of them was these large format printers. And my husband had incidentally at the same time been looking at himself getting a large format printer to reproduce his artwork. And I thought, oh, okay, this is something that he would be interested in. And it's here and it's part of the package. And there's so many options for this. You can print, big signage. Vehicle wraps were just becoming a thing at that time. Like the full coverage vehicle wraps, and you use these printers to print those. And my husband likes cars. So that was kind of eventually the way our business gravitated, but there were so many opportunities to use this printer, and I knew he would get excited about it. I kind of dragged him kicking and screaming into this. He was aghast that I was going to take the entire 401k and dump it into our business. But now he's come around, and I'm sitting here talking to you, and he's running the shop.
Yeah, so I'm curious. So when you started this
Uh-huh.
search, there was not an intention for him to be in the business. He was just going to keep doing his thing as an artist.
Well, he was still painting and doing his thing as an artist. And in our initial shop that we started, he had a studio in the shop. But, as we gained more clients and they had these odd requests for what they wanted to do with graphics, he had a solution. And so he just naturally, came into, he's a great problem solver. And for a long while, our niche was give us your most unique, graphic challenge, and he could solve it. So that was where we spent a lot of time doing a lot of really odd, projects. We started, wrapping trash cans. At the time, that seemed really odd. Now you see it everywhere. Creating big graphic sticks of butter I can't even remember what that project was, but you name it, we were doing the odd projects. And then it kind of diverted into mostly vehicle wraps. We were in our location in Southern California, one of the first vehicle wrap installers and or producers and installers, and it just kind of migrated that way.
So it sounds to me like you just kind of boiled the frog. You didn't tell him he needed to do anything. You just had these interesting problems and you said, "Hey, I could really use your help here." And then you just sort of sucked him in over time.
Yeah, I don't know. He kind of would, it's more like he would come and say, "Oh, no, we can do that." I'd be like, "Oh, we don't do this." "No, we can do that." So he's kind of the one who would want to tackle these weird projects.
Yeah, the challenges.
Yeah,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm curious, what was the conversation when you started talking about using retirement funds, and how did you get through that as a couple? Sounds like that
Mhm.
happens a lot where you have people that view differently in terms of taking on debt or using retirement funds or taking equity against the
Right.
home that you live in. So
Yeah.
how did that go, and what did you finally do that convinced him?
It was pretty early on in our relationship. Our this was God 15, no, more. Oh, wow. 16, 17 years ago that we started having this conversation, and our kids were little. And um I don't know, back then we didn't, we weren't even thinking about retirement. We had two small kids at home and one on the way, and I was flying all over the globe and leaving him home with these small children and taking one in utero to India every month. And so I think he didn't even care. It was like, let's take this money that we've amassed and invest it in ourselves. And it just seemed like a really good idea at the time. It was absolutely a roller coaster. The first 3 years were, super highs and lows, like, oh my God, this is so great. I can't believe we did it sooner, to the next week, what the heck have we done? Like this was ridiculous. But I'd say after about 3 years, we found our footing. And after really about 5 years, it started to kind of plug along. And we were able to, in the beginning, you're just taking on any business you can get. And as you go along, you start to decide, oh, these are really great customers and these aren't. And how do we shift the business to more and more of those great customers? And we've had some customers, since that we still have since the beginning, and some that, we wish them well. And now we're like pretty selective about the new clients that we do take on. So it's a good place to be.
So you had a lot of changes happening at once.
Oh
You
yeah.
started a business and had your third child
Yeah.
basically at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Not my first child, my third. So,
Your third, yeah.
yeah.
But still, that means
Yeah.
you also had two small ones at home.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot, but we were young. We just did it.
How did you get through it?
um, I think I was raised with a belief that you can do whatever you put your mind to, and you just say you're going to do it, and then you back up saying it with creating an action plan and steps to achieve that. And you give yourself some milestone check-ins to say, are these action steps still getting us toward our goal or not? And do we need to readjust? It's basic business planning and operations. You set a goal, you set your plan, you work your plan, you reassess. But all the while saying, I'm going to make this happen. Failure is not an option. Those things. And we started this in 2008 when the economy had really tanked. And I think that actually was a blessing for us because we didn't know anything better than this horrible economy that we started in. And so once the economy bounced back, it was just booming for us. But we had to really, I was, very specific goals, if you want to talk about them, was for me to have a meeting every single day where I met another new business owner that could potentially become a client. So I had an action plan that had me at a meeting, whether it's a Rotary Club, a Chamber of Commerce, some sort of networking or get together group where I could meet one person and build a connection every single day. And that's how we grew and this was before the internet. We didn't even have a website when we started our business, which is,
Well, that's hugely important. I think it's actually a thing that many
yeah,
new business owners overlook is how important their role needs to be in driving customers when they first
yeah,
start
yeah.
building that momentum. So what was it that clued you into, hey, this is where I need to spend my time? How did you figure out what was the most important place to spend your time?
Well, I tracked it. I mean, I knew that I had to go out and meet the people that would potentially be our customers. And the Sign World organization that we joined had a lot of like training materials and case studies and information behind them that they shared with us so we could kind of pick and choose what worked best for us. In my local area, I joined all those groups. I joined several networking groups, Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club. In Long Beach, the Rotary Club was huge. It was over 450 members at the time.
Oh, wow.
And you just kind of, after you go meet with all these people, then you see where your business comes from. You track where every new client comes from. And after 6 months, you look at where am I spending my time and, where are the revenues coming from? And it tells you, the paper tells you, oh, I'm, building the best relationships through the Rotary Club. And so over time, I spent more time in Rotary and less at, the, adjacent Chamber of Commerce, in the adjacent town down the street, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting as you're talking, you can hear some of the structure from your corporate life coming out that you're bringing into
Yeah.
being a small business owner. And you
Right.
talked earlier about sort of wanting to have more control over your time. What was the catalyst? Did you always dream of owning a business, or was there some point in time with being pregnant with your third kid or whatever that you just said, okay, enough's enough? Like what finally tipped you over the edge?
It was the trip I took to India when I was about 6 months pregnant, and a friend of mine in India, I went for an extended time, and we took a weekend, and we went out to Rajasthan to this really cool like fort palace thing, and I was so careful about, I only ate cooked foods, and I never got the deli belly. But she and I both went to this place, and she's Indian, and we both got horribly sick. And I came back and I had to be hospitalized at 6 months pregnant because I couldn't keep any food in. I was a mess. And at that point I thought, what am I doing? Like, this is a lot. And after this kid's born, I don't want to miss, the stuff that my husband was experiencing with the kids at home. And I think I've done this enough. I'd been traveling globally for extensively, for 5 years. And I remember as we changed houses, and as we were packing up to move, I looked at a calendar that had December. It was like December 2007 or 2006. I can't remember. And in that month, I had been in Chicago, Singapore, Chicago. We went to Hawaii. I went to India. I went back to Chicago, like all in a month, which just
Wow.
was like, what are you doing? So one
It
of
was
my
really, go ahead.
one of my key I made a list of criteria when we were looking to invest in a business and start a business, and I basically had 5 things. I had been in a service industry, and I wanted to actually make something, or at least be in an industry where what you delivered to your client was something they were going to get excited about and really love. Because prior to that, I had been in an industry where we were helping companies who had pretty much already failed at the thing they were trying to do, and we were coming in to help clean up. And so it was starting from a really low point to get them to a high point. And I wanted to just play in all the high point stuff, so that was one. So artistry and graphic design and making people look good, on whatever was exciting. I wanted it to be pretty much local, or at least for me, where most of your customers are in your local area, and where I didn't have to travel, to another hemisphere to do the work. And I wanted it to be a 9 to 5 job, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Nobody expecting you to get on a conference call at midnight and then at 4 a.m. None of this working around the clock. Weekends free to spend with my kids. And there was one other thing I can't remember. I had 5 things, but those were the key. And as I evaluated opportunities, I wanted to be completely in control of how we spent our time and money. And the sign, as I evaluated all these opportunities that I was looking at against that model, the sign company model just fit everything.
Stood out.
Checked all the boxes. Yeah.
So I'm curious, I know it was quite a few years in the past, but how did you come up with your criteria? Did you just sit down with a notebook on a day you were feeling frustrated and write? Like, how long did it take you, and what sort of process did you go through
it took
to
me
figure that out?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. You already knew.
I'd been in the corporate world for so long and in the same industry for so long that I just knew it was more like what I didn't want to do. It was kind of like,
Yeah.
I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this. So I want the opposite. And what's the opposite? And
That's
this is
awesome.
it. This is the
That's
opposite.
that was Charlie Munger's favorite advice, right? Always
Yeah.
invert.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you just started with what you didn't like about your corporate life, and you went to the opposite, and that was the
Yeah, because there was a
criteria
lot
you
of good
used.
things. In fact, I had even at one point, I had a great boss at the last 5 years of my career in corporate life who had said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to travel. I want to see the world." And he basically carved out a position for me where that's what I did. And I had told him, and he was great. And I had a great team that worked inside of a very dysfunctional company. And so at one point I said to him, when you leave, you give me 6 months heads up, because if this team isn't here, I don't want to work here. And he did, and it all worked out. And he and one of my former colleagues actually are having a wedding in India this February, and I'm hoping to go. So
Oh, fantastic.
revisit old times. Yeah.
Well, let's back up and talk about the sign world opportunity, because this one's a little unique. People might be familiar with franchises. Many people are familiar with buying an existing business.
Uh-huh.
And technically what you did was kind of a startup, but maybe with some components of what people would typically associate with a franchise. So talk to us about what Sign World was and what it did for you.
Uh-huh. It represented the best of both worlds. It was all the benefits of a franchise, meaning the support and the buying group power and, the case studies and the training, etc. and the best of starting up from scratch, having the freedom to do whatever you wanted with your time and your money and how you crafted your business. It was the best of both. And then it was none of the big drawback to a franchise is that you're not a business owner unless you own the franchise. You are an owner operator as a franchisee. And you have to operate by all the rules that the franchise puts in place, and you have to give a top percentage of your gross back to the franchise. And this was not that. And then as a standalone startup business, or worse, buying an existing business, you've either got to do it completely from scratch, make it up all as you go along, or you inherit another business and you're inheriting that business's problems as well. So it truly was, in my mind, the best of both worlds.
Yeah, you got the
And it
support.
turned out to be. I mean, they walked the talk. Everything they promised, they delivered on, which was
Yeah,
great.
so what did that look like? Sounds like there was some upfront investment that
Hmm.
included some of your equipment and some amount of training. What can you tell us about what you
Um,
paid for and what you got, and what sort of
sure.
ongoing support is or isn't part of that?
Yeah. The investment was right around $200,000. I don't remember the exact number. And I know that 35,000 of that was an investment, was a fee to the court, to the Sign World organization. And the rest of it was all allocated to, computers and printers and office furniture and some materials, a couple of training sessions, the CRM software, and stuff that would have cost us a lot more had we had to not buy it as part of this package.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and then, the $35,000 fee over, I mean, God, the first sign we sold was to my yoga studio. And Gabe, if you're listening, I apologize. But he was the owner of the yoga studio, and where I had been going for years. And I walked in and I was talking to the owner. I knew him well, and I said, "Oh yeah, we're starting our own business, a sign company." He's like, "Oh, we're moving, and we need channel letter sign." And I'm like, "Great, we can do that." And I go back to my office and I get on the phone and I call up another Sign World owner, and I'm like, "What's a channel letter sign?" And they tell us, and have someone build it for us, and we get it installed. And that was our first sign. But that was how a lot of our very first projects were we'd get the business, and then I'd turn to another owner of, another similar business like mine, and say, "How do I do this?" And oftentimes they were helping me do it, or, doing it for me until
That is really cool. So
it
you're
was
paying
really,
this company Sign World upfront to do that,
mm-hmm.
but then what is the sort of ongoing thing? You just develop relationships as
Yep.
part of that with some of
Yeah.
these other owners, and then you just tap into that
Mm-hmm.
whenever you want?
Yep, absolutely. And Sign World would host, they did a couple really cool things that we don't really participate in anymore, but in the first like 5 to 10 years, we were heavily participating in. Number one, they would host a Sign World convention every year in either Vegas or Tennessee. And you would go to these conventions and they'd bring all their vendors in and all the other Sign World owners, and you'd meet them and you'd talk. There's a lot of niche areas in signage. There's ADA signage. And now I know two other Sign World owners who do, just ADA. And if I need it, that's where I get it. They wholesale it to me. There's another one, down in San Diego that does just like trade show graphic displays, and they wholesale them to me. That's where I get them. So you meet all those people in person and develop relationships with them, and they help you out when you get, a certain job. And the other thing they did was, I don't know, we really hit the ground running. So at about 5 years in, we were one of the locations companies that they showcased for new potential owners who wanted to buy in. And they would bring these people along with, they had some other owners that were veterans that would accompany this group, and they'd walk them through your shop and say, "Here's Sarah and James, here's what they do. When you start your business, you can rely on them for this, XYZ." So it was brilliant. It creates this, whenever we have something like we have right now, we have a one client that's bringing us a lot of new business all over the East Coast. And now they've got this one truck in Raleigh, North Carolina, we've got to get fixed. So our first thing is, okay, who's the Sign World owner in North Carolina? Because I know that because Sign World owners are all kind of brought in from the same place of having worked in the corporate world and now are here. I know that whoever's in Raleigh, or New Jersey or Atlanta, that I can rely on them to treat my customers the way I treat my customers. Because we all kind of have the same basic background in how we run a business.
Interesting. So does Sign
Yeah.
World, do they do any kind of filtering of you as a potential owner?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what were the requirements? What did they put you through?
They met with us several times. They had us, I think they,
Excuse me.
bless you, I think they flew us out to, I can't remember exactly, but I feel like they flew us out to Hawaii for a training, but really to meet some other people and assess. God, it was so long ago.
It
They were
sounds
definitely
exactly.
assessing us as we were assessing them. Like, because they want you to be successful. They don't want to bring on people who, go out of business 2 years later. They want you to thrive, and because that's a big part of their success story, right? Is saying, look at these companies that we helped launch that are now 5, 10, 15 years, 20 going on. It's a successful model. So they were definitely assessing. I know there were a couple people from our initiation group who they were like, yeah, this isn't going to work for you. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds exactly like a franchise,
uh-huh.
except for the ongoing
Yeah.
royalty relationship. So what
Yep.
is Sign World's incentive for sort of ongoing to run these workshops and stay connected with
I think to
people?
continue, I don't know what that fee is for us. It was $35,000. That's, in 2008, that was nothing to sneeze at. So if
Yeah,
there are, 10 or 15 new businesses paying, it's probably closer to $50,000 a year right now. That's a good $500,000 to $1 million. They're probably bringing in on, the fee. Um, that's a good incentive.
yeah. What kind of due diligence did you do on Sign World? And did you get that far with any of the other opportunities you looked at, or is this the only one you sort of went deep
Um,
down the rabbit hole with?
This is the only one I really went deep down the rabbit hole with because most everything else was, top line, percentage of gross, and I was just throwing those out the window. um, and the due diligence, it was kind of they made us do the due diligence just by taking us all around and having us meet other owners and talking about their experience and looking at, these other Sign World owners would share their numbers with us and how it worked. And it was
Got it.
a very transparent um, thing. It was very transparent. That was another big plus for me. Nothing was hidden.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
So they offered you some training up front. Did they do
Mhm.
any sort of work or help you with anything on the budgeting side, or was it just connecting you to owners
Oh,
and you
yeah,
asking
they
them
had
questions?
a sample budget. They had one sample budget. And I remember one Sign World owner at one point, yeah, they had theoretically, this is where you should be, how much of your cost of goods should be, how much your expenses should be, what you should be paying yourself. And um, pretty easy blueprint to follow. And when we were maybe a year or so in, and I was talking to another Sign World owner, and she says, "What are you paying yourself?" And I'm like, "Paying myself? Oh, I haven't." She's like, "Well, then why are you doing this?" And I'm like, "Oh, good point." She said, "Whatever you do, even if you don't cash the check, start making it a habit of paying yourself." And I was like, "Duh." It was a light bulb moment. And so I did. And, yeah, you got to pay yourself.
Well, it's interesting because that's sort of a catalyst, right? That then forces you to say, how do I
Yeah.
make sure the business can afford this?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
fantastic. So you only went deep down the rabbit hole with one because none of the other ones met your criteria that you sort of put together.
Mm-hmm.
You got a sort of template budget. Did you just sort of build your own
Mm-hmm.
from there, you took that template and then you sort of built it
Mhm.
out based on talking to other owners.
Yep.
Um,
And
anything else
also
that,
based like adjusted over the realities. We got really into vehicle wraps early on,
okay.
and that wasn't something that a lot of other companies, either inside Sign World or outside, were doing at the time. And the margins were a little different. We had to figure out the margins, what they were even going to be, um, and which types of vehicle wraps and everything. But we did figure that out eventually. But yeah, we had the flexibility to do our own thing.
Yeah. Well, you made a side comment the other time about wrapped trash cans being a thing now. I've literally never seen a wrapped trash can. So
Oh no.
what is the
Yeah.
what are they doing with trash cans these days?
They put like big decals around them that have some graphics, or you see them at the beach. I live at the beach, so we see them all over the beach. Huntington
Got
Beach
it.
puts big graphics around. We did them the first time for ESPN for some event, and they were the big three segment recycling bins, and they were having, I don't know, for the ESPYs, I think, and we did some big beautiful wrapped trash cans for them, like you know works of art for their event.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Sarah, when you think about what your expectations were coming into being a business owner,
Hmm.
what has proven to be true and what has been surprising for you?
Huh. I hadn't thought of that. What is true? Um, I guess the truth that I expected is that as a business owner, the business will become your life. Um, Meaning that you never leave it. You don't. I mentioned earlier, like the 9 to 5 thing. Yeah, I don't have a client breathing down my neck after 5 o'clock, but I do have, um, I've got to take care of the people I employ. I've got to make sure they have work and a paycheck coming. Um, and so I've got to constantly be thinking about where are new customers coming from, or how do we, get more from existing customers, or maintain, the workflow that we have to support our staff. And that's a responsibility I think I knew would be there going in, and it's proven to be true. Um, something I didn't, something I didn't know or didn't consider. What was the question?
I
Or
think either is potentially
either.
relevant. What
Um,
surprised you?
what surprised me was how quickly I was telling myself, I can't believe you didn't do this sooner, that I waited so
Say
long.
more, say more about that. What was it? Where did that thought come from?
Um, God, how far back do you want to go? So I'm a
If we need to go
woman,
back to the farm, let's do it.
seriously, I'm a woman of a generation that was probably the first generation of women told, you can be whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. You can go to college. My own mother, couldn't have her own bank account when I was a little kid. So,
Really? Wow.
yeah. So we are the first generation of women who really could do whatever you want. Um, but men could do it better. Men had more access all my whole life. Like we, God, there wasn't even a girls' water polo team at my high school because there wasn't. And if girls wanted to play water polo, they had to play on the boys' team because of Title IX. They were allowed to. But it was a fight. There were only 2 or 3 girls in our whole high school willing to get in that pool. Yes.
Yeah.
Because society, while my mom and grandma and women in my life have been saying, you can do it, now the rules have changed. You can go do all these things. Society was still saying, no, you don't. Even at the company I worked at, all, the top level executives were still all men. And when I was getting in the room with those men, I was realizing, oh my God, you are so mediocre, and yet I will never have your job, and you're so mediocre. And so that was what, society was showing me, that the leaders were these mediocre white men, and I could never be one. And so that was maybe sort of the impetus, but as well as what kind of held me back from having the confidence to say, I can go do this, because there weren't a lot of female role models for my generation at the time, as I was growing up. Luckily
Yeah.
now
So
my daughters don't have that, hanging over their head.
yeah. So had you dreamed of being a business owner for a long time?
No.
It sounds like
Uh,
then.
Not dream. I wouldn't say dreamed of it, but I'd say I dreamed of, how do I get out of the corporate machine I'm part of? How do
Yeah.
I step away from having someone else own my time? Because at the end of the day, that's all we all really have is our time and how we choose to spend it. And how do I get away from that?
So for you, it was, and this is tracks with the story you've shared so far. It's
Hmm.
about going away from the thing you don't want.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you were searching for freedom, and really the
Yeah.
path for that is business ownership. So you weren't
Yeah.
fantasizing about being a business owner. You were just saying, I want to be in control of my time.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And
Yeah.
this is a way to do that.
Absolutely.
Now, contrast for us your life in the corporate world versus your life as a business owner, and how it compares, stress level, what you
Hmm.
spend your time on, fulfillment. I mean,
It's so different. I went in 1 year from learning, over the course of 1 year, my accountant, my last year in the corporate world, I get hit with a big tax bill, and my accountant says, "Oh yeah, that's called our alternative minimum tax, because it's a good problem to have. You made too much money." Okay. The next year, after we start our business and we haven't been paying ourselves, we file our tax return and we get this huge refund. And I call up my accountant. I said, "What is this refund? I didn't even, hardly make this much money. What is it?" "Oh, that's called earned income credit." I said, "What is earned income credit?" "Oh, that's the poor people refund." What? Oh my God. Okay. So you kind of, in the corporate world, I felt like I was always chasing the dollars, chasing, the next job, the next promotion, the next bonus, all going into the bank account or the 401k, growing that money number. And that's not fulfilling. Even though I loved my team and the work that I did and I was traveling, at the end of the day, I was doing it for this money number, which was not that thrilling to me personally. As a business owner, it all shifts, because now you're not paying yourselves what you used to be paying. You've structured your business in a way that your expenses are a lot different now. And you're okay with alternative minimum, or earned income credit. You're okay with a lower number on your personal tax return, because now you have your own organic garden that you're able to manage, and you play tennis a few times a week, and you get together with friends, at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, random nights of the week, because you can. And you've now structured your business in such a way that you can take care of, like, I'm responsible for the administration side, the banking, all the minutia paperwork detail that my husband couldn't care less about. And I figured out a way to, segment that into certain times of the day that I want to do it. I look at my week and I say, okay, I'm going to go to the garden, and I'm going to play tennis, and I'm going to do this and that with my kid. And here's where I'm going to work on, taxes this week. And here's where I'm going to work on, collections and, whatever. I just get to do it when I want to do it.
yeah. So you've created some form of time freedom for yourself,
Absolutely.
and maybe a little bit of a pay cut. Is that what you're saying as well? At
Yeah.
least in terms of income coming
But,
in?
but in my personal experience, a huge boost in lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, and of course, you're building something with equity value that at
Yeah,
some point you
absolutely.
may
And
decide to do
and
something
I
with.
would say, while it's a pay cut, it's a huge increase in just lifestyle. Huge increase in lifestyle.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Stress
Hawaii
levels
tomorrow.
any stress levels any different?
Overall, I'd say it's better. Um, I'm not worried about um, I'm not worried about what people who I don't really care about think about their job or my job or what the company's doing. Like, I working for a large corporation, you're often working with people you don't choose to work for. Now I choose who, everyone we hire, and I'm deeply invested in them being successful and them getting a paycheck, and I like these people. And I'm not, I will do what it takes to make sure that they are successful, but I'm not working with, people down the hall that I would never have hired in the first place, and now I'm having to bend over backwards to clean up their mistakes or whatever.
Yeah.
So that kind of stress doesn't exist.
So you get to choose who you work for and who you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great thing.
Yeah. How has the journey been for the kids? You have one that hasn't known anything other than you being a business owner, and
Yeah.
then sounds like a couple others that might like. What
You
is what
know,
is their take been?
they don't really remember anything other than us being part of this. They were all really young. My youngest was, yeah, a baby. But his sister's only 15 months older than him, so she doesn't really know anything else. And the next one is only 4.5 years older, so she was, 5 or 6 when we started this. So they don't really have any memories of before. Um, so it's pretty much the same. They
They
just
just
know
know
us
that.
as business owners, and I think that's been really good for them because they they see their life choices as being able to be in control of their time and how they spend it as well, um, which is awesome, I think, for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could go back in a time machine, Sarah,
hmm
knowing what you know today,
hmm
is there anything you would have done differently?
Oh, the biggest thing I would have done differently is I would have started with the website. This was
We-
2008, and we didn't have a business website for almost a year. I would have done that. That's just a small tactical thing I would have done differently. Oh yeah, the other thing I remember you when you touched on this earlier, using my 401k to roll over to start the business. We still had a healthy chunk of cash in the bank when we did that, and the banker said, she's like, "Well, do you want a line of credit?" And I said, "I don't think we need it." And they were offering us this huge line of credit that all I saw was potential debt in my mind, right?
Yep.
And I said, "No, I don't think we need it." I would have taken it and
Yeah.
she's like, I said, "No, that's so much potential debt." And she's like, "That's potential leverage." And I just like dismissed it. Um, when you have the startup cash and you're opening your bank account and they offer you a huge line of credit, take it.
Take it.
That's my advice.
What would that have enabled you to do? At what point did you look back and say, "Ah, I wish I would have taken
At
that"?
one point, like we were wanting to, maybe expand our space or hire additional people, and it was a real juggle in the cash flow to make that happen. Like we'd have to wait until we got another huge order in order to bring that other person on board. And if we had had that line of credit sitting there, we could have leveraged that sooner. Um, yeah,
Got it.
take the line of credit.
Take the line of credit. That's
Yeah,
great advice.
yeah.
Any other takeaways that you have from the process of getting started? I mean, maybe you could even reflect back on what I've seen as a pattern with a lot of entrepreneurs where for a couple of years it's really intense work,
hmm
and then they start to build enough scale where they're able to create more of the life that they want.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about your journey. What did that look like in the early stages?
hmm
And when did you get to points in time where you started to really craft that life around how you wanted to spend your time and what you wanted to work on and
hmm
who you wanted to
I
work with?
Yeah, I'd say the first 3 years were a real grind. Um, but we had little kids, so life was a grind anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
you live in a cave.
yeah, it was a grind. But after about the 5 year, like in the 3 to 5 years, there were it was starting to even out. And then after 5, it was really, okay, what do we want to do? How do we want to do this? Can we fire that client now? That kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Maybe talk about that, because that's another common issue that I see
mhm,
with entrepreneurs is that they're scrambling for any revenue they can get in the door up front.
mhm.
And then later on, they figure out there are some clients they are paying for the privilege of serving and doing it at the expense of their health and
Yeah.
their mental well-being. What would you tell someone knowing what you know today
Yeah.
about how to think about the right clients and when the
Mhm.
right time is to evaluate and let go of those people?
Yeah. The best way to do it is that, I mean, really trust your gut. Listen to your gut. And if your gut's telling you that this client or this person isn't worth your time, um, rather than just cut them off and say no, just give yourself a price tag. Okay, I'll take this job, but now this is what it's going to cost. What's my price tag for dealing with them? And I even trained, oh God, I had this great guy working for us a while ago. He grew up in a family run business as well, and he really got it. And I said, George, he'd say, oh, this guy's calling again. I'd say, okay, for that guy, it's double, because he gave everyone in our problem. And so George talked to him, and he's like, okay, he's going to do it, but I got triple. And I'm like, you go, George. Because George knew that he was going to have to deal with, most of the contact with this guy. And George got triple. So, and then, okay, we're getting triple. We'll put up with, a little bit more headache. But then you do get to a point where not even there's no number.
Yeah.
You just price them out. You're like, oh, well, this is our price. And they decide to go somewhere else, and everyone's happy.
Well, that philosophy is brilliant, Sarah, because
Mhm.
your strategy is I'm not going to create friction with this person and say, I won't work with you because you're
Right.
an a-hole.
Yeah.
You're saying, yeah, we're happy to do it. This is our price.
Yeah.
And actually, what probably happens more often than not is the exact opposite. The people who grind most on the entrepreneurs are the ones who are grinding to get the cheapest price and the
Mm-hmm.
most things. And so
Yeah.
you end up bending over backwards.
Yeah. Yep. It's always those people. And for a long time, even from the get-go, you can have, there's that saying, you can have three things, like a cheap price, a good quality, and a fast turnaround, right? And you
Choose
can only
two.
have 2 of those 3. And so we always focused on good quality and fast turnaround. We were not, and I would tell people up front, we are not going to be the cheapest. We will get it done, and we will get it done right, and we stand behind our work, and we'll meet your deadline, but we're not going to be the cheapest. And if you're looking for the cheapest, that's not us. I did not want to be that.
Did you do that from the outset?
Yeah.
Or is that something you sort of got more courageous with as you started to generate some revenue and feel a little more security?
It was a philosophy that I had and believed in from the outset. It definitely went into practice more and more as we got established.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. It's
Yeah.
a little easier to be courageous
Yeah.
when you're
Yep.
not worried about surviving.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Sarah. Well, one last question for
Sure.
you. I'd love to have you, if you could distill down your experience and say, if there's one thing you would want
Mm-hmm.
an aspiring business owner to know that
Mm-hmm.
you think would be really helpful from your story about helping them find success for themselves, what would that be?
It would be to just believe in yourself. Just if you believe in yourself and that you can do it and that you will do it, you will do it. You just always have to, when things get hard, you just go back to believe in yourself. Can I do it? Will I do it? It's like my 8-year-old daughter. I took her snowboarding. She had started on a competitive gymnast team, and we're riding up the chairlift, and we're going over a very steep black diamond run. And she's 8 years old, and she says, "Oh, I want to go down that." I said, "That's a black diamond." And she looks down on it and she says, "Looks easier than doing a cartwheel on the beam." And I said, "You're probably right." And so we went down it, and we got down it, and I said, "So?" And she's like, "It's easier than doing a cartwheel on the beam." And, she believed she could do it. And so she did it. And I think anyone can do that.
Did you always have that, Sarah, or is that something that you developed? I mean, is there any takeaway for other people other than like, hey, get a really cool cat poster that says believe and look at it
Um,
every day?
I think I was fortunate to have, parents and a family around me who reinforced that message that you can do it. I grew up in my mother's family was Roman Catholic. My father was an atheist, and I
Sounds
went
like
to
a fun
Catholic
Thanksgiving.
school, and I'd go to school and I'd learn these things, and I'd come home and I'd say to my dad, Dad, what they're telling me, I believe this, or they're telling me these stories. And he would never, always his answer was, well, what do you think? And I'd say, oh. And so he really empowered me to think, think for myself. What do you think? Do you think you can do that? Yeah. So I think it was something that was instilled in me very young by my parents, that and my grandma, and the women, that yeah, you can do whatever you put your mind to.
Well, you've done it. You've been doing it
Yeah,
for 16 years. And
yeah,
Sarah, I really appreciate you taking the time to
sure.
share those parts of your story. I think
Thank you.
the time freedom that you're searching for, I think, is something a lot of people long for. You talked
Yeah.
about the corporate world and that pain of feeling like you're constantly chasing something
Mm-hmm.
that isn't really giving you any sort of fulfillment
Mm-hmm.
or pleasure. And I think that will resonate with people. So I appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing that being with us here today. And
absolutely.
we wish you the best of luck as you continue to grow your business,
Thank you.
Iconography.
I appreciate it.
Is there anything you would want to share with our listeners or viewers?
Just if you've been thinking about starting your own business and you are confident in things you've done in the past, that you can do it. Go do it.
Go for it.
Go for it.
Love it.
You only have one life. Go for it.
Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.